James Stone is one of the Sanhedrin of the career technical education world. You're surprised that an Irish Catholic boy from Brooklyn would know that term, right? He has had a long and esteemed career in this field, and he is now director of the National Research Center for Career and Technical Education at the University of Louisville in Kentucky. He has done a great deal of research on strategies that improve the quality of CTE programs and the capacity of CTE programs to work with students on engagement, achievement, and transition to post-secondary educational opportunities. He is a professor and distinguished university scholar in the College of Education and Human Development at the University of Louisville. He has worked on this for decades. He's somebody else who, like Randy and I, go back to the last century. So, without any further ado, let me bring up James Stone.
Sanhedrin. I'm Southern Baptist. I don't have a clue.
You okay? Got it.
We'll see. Just talk amongst yourselves.
Here we go.
Okay. All right, first things first. You all have been sitting a long time. Many of you, I know, traveled a long time, so we're going to have a vocational training exercise. Stand up. Your arms out in front of you, just like this. Make your fingers do this. Turn 30 degrees to your left. There will be a shoulder in front of you. Keep on your shoulder. Make human contact. Guys, you can do this. Okay, you can stop. Okay, you two back there. That's I think the phrase is get a room. All right. This is the best place to be in a conference agenda, is standing between you, dinner, and sleep. Thank you, Randall, for this honored and esteemed position. I do research, and the longer I've been at this, the less I know. I do know this, however. In the 1990s, I was working on a project looking at magnet schools in New York City with Bob Crane, and one of the schools that we visited was Clara Barton. It's entirely likely, when I go home, I'm going to dig out my field notes. It's entirely likely that Randy and I've interacted over the years without knowing it. So, let's get started. High quality career and technical education, what the research shows. By the way, I'm a college professor. I talk in 3-hour increments. I've been asked to compress that amount of information into about 20 minutes. Stay tuned. So, as I think about this notion of career and technical education, I always like to start with a globe, because Thomas Friedman taught us it's a flat world. And indeed it is. But I'd also like you to picking up on the theme of some of the preceding speakers, I want you to sort of, for a moment, imagine what career and technical education could be. Imagine what the future could be if we sort of started from scratch and built something new. Years ago, when I used to make money doing consulting work, we'd put people through these visioning processes, and this is kind of how we'd start. So, I do research. I love numbers, crunching data. This is why I live. But when I think about the future, this is what I think about. Let me introduce you to Liam and Aaron. Liam on the left, Aaron on the right. They're two of my grandsons who live with me now. This comes under the rubric of karma is a bitch. Screwed up the first generation. Somehow I'm going to do a better job with these guys? Extraordinarily unlikely. But when I imagine the future, I imagine the class of 2020 and 2021. And you have your Liams and you have your Aarons, whether they're your children, your grandchildren, perhaps looking around the room, your great-grandchildren. May you live so long. Point is simply this, that it isn't just numbers that we're looking at, it is the lives of children, it is the lives of young adults, it is the lives of adults. I know that in the coming generation, what Thomas Friedman did teach us is that my grandchildren, your children, if they're not already, they will be competing against children from literally around the world, from India, from Asia, from China, from South America, Central America. They're not competing for the best test scores against the kids in the school down the street or the state next on the map. They're competing against kids, as was mentioned earlier, in Singapore and in Finland and elsewhere in the world. We have to keep this in mind as we envision and imagine the future. So here's what I'd like to do today. I can't have these conversations without providing a bit of context, and so you're going to get it. I want to take a quick look at the labor market because for career and technical education at one level, that's the raison d'etre. That's where we begin, right? So we want to take a look at that, and also some economic trends that are both, they're damn depressing. Another technical term. I also want to look backwards just briefly. There was mention made of sort of this trend we've been in for some period of time now with the focus on accountability. I want to take a look at the evidence that's out there. Now, it is a fact that, let me just put it this way. We make a lot of assumptions about things that we think ought to be done. And I can assure you that more often than not, if your assumptions are wrong, the solutions are very likely also to be wrong. Now, in my introductions, it was mentioned I've been around for a long time. We've been here before. Some of us went through the youth apprenticeship movement, school to work movement, back to the basics movement. As a child, I was in school when the Russians shot up this Sputnik into the atmosphere, created a hole, which I knew, because I read it in the National Enquirer, precocious reader as a child, that hole would suck all the oxygen out and we'd all die. Those damn Russians, it was a plot. We all had to become rocket scientists. That was our first flirtation with STEM phobia. We're back in it, guys. I've got some data on that. My point is simply this, is that we made assumptions, we implemented policies, and after about 5 years of the National Defense Education Act, the business community went to the president and said, hey, this is all great, but you only need a few rocket scientists. We need somebody else who can actually do work. And so we had the 1963 VEA. That's Stone's version of history. So let's take a look at the labor market. There are three perspectives I want to share, worse, worser, and OMG. Those of you who aren't twits have no idea what that means. Did I say that correctly? I've never conjugated the verb to Twitter properly. It comes out sounding somewhat obscene, so I don't do it. So if we take a look at some data sources, and I want to provide several perspectives. The Bureau of Labor Statistics routinely puts out data projecting 10 years ahead. Largest growth in terms of net new jobs, the top 5 are here. Only one of the top 5 requires anything beyond high school. A registered nurse, which in most places is a 2-year community college associate degree. Good pay, terrible hours, you have to work with obnoxious doctors. You actually, in this list, have to go down to number 10 and number 15 before you pick up anything that requires a baccalaureate credential, and guess what? They're educators. Now, you can go down further the list, you certainly find more. These are the jobs that are the labor market into which our young people are moving. Now, fastest growth is what often gets the headlines. This suffers from the denominator problem, and number 3 shows what I mean by that. Biomedical engineer, 62% growth over the next decade in biomedical engineers. We're going to add 9,700 in a labor market that will number by most estimates at about 160 million. Do the math. Not very many. And again, with this list, you have to go down a bit further, and I'm sorry if you all can't read that, I apologize. Vet tech, physical therapist, those are 2-year credentials. Again, there's a much longer list. The point is simply this, is that if we assume everybody's moving into a STEM-intensive, high-pay, high-demand kind of job, those are not high demand. Many of them are high-pay, but that's also rapidly changing for reasons I'll share with you in just a moment. Here's another perspective. Center for Education and Work against the BLS. It's WWE SmackDown. 2 approaches to analyzing data. I won't bore you with what's different, but there are some interesting parallels. BLS says over the next decade, more or less, about 23% of the jobs that we expect to emerge will require a baccalaureate, and the rest something less, with a huge number of just high school only. Center for Education and Work at Georgetown University, and they've got to be right because I've been told they talk to God. I believe everything I'm told, especially if I read it in the National Enquirer. They estimate a third. So somewhere between a quarter and a third probably lies truth of the number of young people that ought to be really targeting a 4-year degree. Now, they break out the remaining in different ways. They have another 30% they refer to as some college, which led initially to headlines that said, look, 33 plus 30, that's 63, that's almost 2/3. 2/3 of new jobs emerging will require college. Everybody thought, oh, 4-year college. No, some college includes a 10-week welding certification all the way up to the 2-year credentials and all the things in between. That's some college. That's some college. Now, you have to be a little careful trying to project, and I just share this to make my point. Some of you may not remember this, but in 1977, can I have a moment for the king here? Thank you. Thank you very much. There were only 37 Elvis impersonators. Today, we know there are more than 48,000 people who earn their living. If you've been to Vegas lately, you realize it's a non-gender specific occupation, which creates lots of challenges at 3 a.m. in the bar for certain people. Now, if we use BLS projection techniques, this is what we get. In the year 2020, 1 in 3 of you is going to be an Elvis impersonator. This is the point where we start off, count off, 1, 2, yes ma'am, it's you. 1, 2, yes ma'am in the pink, it's you. Go home, get your karaoke. Work on it. It's in your future. Now, let me depress you for a moment, because again, I was raised Southern Baptist. This is what we do. We're better than my Jewish friends at depressing people, because we know we're all going to hell, so what's the point? Race Against the Machine. You can download it on Google Books, Amazon, NEM. It's about $3 now. It's been out a couple of years. It's 2 labor market economists who actually tell a compelling story. They started out they've said this is not the book they intended to write. They wanted to take a current look at the impact of technology on creating jobs, right? Historically, technology has been a creative disruptor. It's destroyed jobs, but in its wake, it's created more, but different kinds of jobs requiring different skills. This is part of our assumption pattern. Guess what? That may no longer be the case. We may be facing, for the first time in history, the destruction of more jobs than the creation of new jobs as a result of technology. It's the third wave of digitization. The computers today have the intelligence of a 4-year-old human. Now think about the 4-year-old. What can they do? Mess up your carpets. The complexity of the thought process for a 4-year-old human is incredible. And that's only come about in the last few years. It's accelerating at an accelerating rate. How many of you in this room have an iPhone with Siri? How many of you talk to Siri often? How many of you have a deep personal relationship with Siri? There's medication for that. But my point is simply this. That's illustrative of the kind of technology that is displacing more people than it's creating new opportunities for. So some of the things, Google cars, Google trucks, headline in the Wall Street Journal today, or a section on these driverless cars where you can drink and drive. Yahoo! About time. IBM Watson, plays chess. Big Blue plays Jeopardy, or the other way around. I always got them confused. You've got the Square. Have you seen that? You know, you can be anywhere. You can make a purchase. They swipe your card. It fits into an iPhone or an Android. Drug dealers love them. They go directly to your bank. They bypass the credit card industry. Text readers, pattern recognition readers are displacing lawyers. Law school enrollments are down substantially across the country for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is we don't need so many anymore because the text can be read by intelligent machines and reports and summations can be created by technology. We don't need a human. Automated call centers, we rejoiced when these things were coming back from India. This is terrific, except they're coming back as interactive technology, not as people. You've been on there. Please pay attention, our menu has changed. No, it hasn't. I know that for a fact. Geofluent, translators, everything's a vending machine. The point is simply this. We are in a race against the machines, and it's not totally clear exactly where that's leading us. But some more contextual items. As of now, 63% of Americans are in the labor market. It's the lowest rate of labor market participation since the Depression. Since the Depression. Young workers are not getting jobs. 13% drop in the labor market interaction or connection with young people since 2007. It's the lowest rate since they started counting in 1948. This age group is not hitting the median income until they hit age 30. That's up from age 26 a few decades ago. The markers are going the wrong way. Women have recovered from the 2007 repression. Yeah, it feels that way. Depression, recession, pick your term to describe it. Except males have not. Males have not. I'm going to come back to what I call the boy problem in just a moment. This one's particularly problematic, especially for kids I know. 60% of employers today check your credit rating before they offer you a job. 78% have some kind of mechanism for checking for drug use. And in a soft labor market, guess what? Both of these things can get you bumped out. We have a real challenge. And there's a new book out called Average is Over by a guy named Cohen. He argues, based on his analysis of data, that in the future, 15% of us will live extraordinarily well. The other 85% will essentially service them. Regardless of education, will be making their coffee, delivering their pizza, and bagging their groceries. Oh, never mind, we don't do that anymore. It's all self-checkout. So, that's just to get you started. So, here's how I think about the problem in education. If you can't read the fine print, my child's an honor student, and the tow truck says, my child knows a cam from a rotor. Somewhere in our history, we separated out, we bifurcated knowledge. We said, this is academic, we place it up here, and we worship it. And this practical knowledge, well, that's for somebody else's kids. And that was, all the speakers thus far today have alluded to that sort of tracking notion. But in the real world, now this is an abstract concept for an academic. When I talk about the real world, I've avoided it studiously for 30 years. It's scary out there. I'd rather be where I am. But in the real world, people tell me there is no bifurcation between the practical use of academics and academic knowledge. It's one thing. You just don't sit there in an office and say, I circle C. It doesn't work that way. So, there's a lot of debates in education right now. Richard Vedder runs something called the Center for College Affordability. He's got some interesting numbers. He argues that we have too many college graduates, that indeed many of them, different estimates, a third or possibly more, who graduate from college are in jobs that don't require a baccalaureate preparation. How much education do you need to schlep coffee at Starbucks? A lot of the earning differentials that we attribute to higher education actually are a function of other attributes the individual brings with them, which is why they get the higher education. It's not actually the learning that takes place. And there's indeed a lot of evidence of credential inflation. On the other hand, the McKinsey Global Institute, a respected analysis organization, says we're not going to have enough college graduates by 2020. Now they say 1.5 million. Again, let's do the math. If the labor market's 160 million, that's the denominator. You ready for this? Take out your pencil, draw that line, 160 million, 1 point. It's not much. It's a fraction of a percent that we may be short. You know, just add some more H-1B visas or something. So we know that technical education matters. Now, in the last decade or more, we've done a pretty good job of getting more people with higher ed credentials. We've had a 31% increase in people with associate's degrees, 24% with baccalaureates, 45% with masters, 43% with PhDs or advanced graduate degrees. We've been getting more people into college and out. But at the same time, the labor market hasn't found a place for them. If we aggregate the kind of data that the BLS puts out, about 41%, 42% of the workforce has these higher ed credentials, and the labor market demand will peg it at 29%, kind of between that 23 and 33. And for those of you that have any fealty to the deity of supply and demand, you know what that means. To the price of the commodity, which in this case is wages, they go down. And indeed, we've seen evidence of that. In 1970, 1% of taxi drivers had a baccalaureate degree. Now 15% do. 5% of sales clerks had a baccalaureate for a high school level job. Now a quarter of them do. This one stuns me, and there's a longer list. 5% of custodians have baccalaureate degrees. Something to ponder. We also know that about 47, whoops, too fast, I apologize. I got to talk faster. 47% of college grads and jobs require less than the blah, blah, blah. The point is simply this. Again, these are contested data. There are data that point in both directions. I've just sort of tapped a little bit on the surface. The Harvard report, Pathways to Prosperity, which I highly recommend you read if you haven't, among the data they present is this chart, which I think is intriguing. Looking at young people in their later 20s, 40% of them have 2 4-year or more in terms of higher education. Terrific. That's good, I guess. What about the 60% that don't? What are we doing for those young people for whom high school is the last formal education experience they will have? And moreover, what about that 40% in terms of actually preparing them for the workplace? There's a great literature that's building on this thing that's supposedly a mismatch between the education, the skills, the training, and what the labor force is actually demanding. So, there are a lot of perspectives on what constitutes high-quality career and technical education. Back to Georgetown, their Center on Law and Poverty has identified a number of factors they think represent high-quality career in tech. I'm going to share several of these. There are many others. And by the way, there are people in this room who could talk a lot more about this than I can, indeed are much more knowledgeable. My colleagues from SREB and the National Academies Foundation are doing this every day. Okay? Kim Green, where'd she go? She's hiding from. She saw me get up to speak, she left. National Association of State Directors. We have the Association for Career and Technical Education here. They're out there on the policy front and the practice front, promoting what really needs to be done. So they have their perspectives as well. Southern Region Education Board has been at this for a long time through various programs like High Schools at Work, Tech Centers that Work, and others. And they would argue that high-quality career in tech has nested in a career pathway design. It's not just simply a class and a teacher, but it's part of a more comprehensive approach. That you have to drill down to the level of student assignments and the curriculum and how you assess within the classroom. That is part of a quality approach to career and technical education. Counseling and guidance is critical. The staff qualifications that the individual has who's there working and interacting with the students, accountability, the connection with business partners, and something new that they're creating, they call advanced careers. And I think Dr. Bottoms is on the agenda tomorrow. I hope he has a chance to talk about this. But I think of this as advanced placement for CTE. It's really cool stuff. And I would match it up with any of the more rigorous academic courses or allegedly rigorous. National Academy Foundation, I don't know, and I apologize if you can't read it. They've got 4 major things that they look at. This is the structure of the academy, how it's designed, a local an advisory board for every one of them, the curriculum instruction, very specific things there, and work-based learning. You see work-based learning show up with linked learning, which is another reform kind of initiative that's beginning to show some interesting data. Again, work-based learning, career pathways-based, nesting it in a comprehensive approach, not just piecemeal. But they add something that I've not seen in too many of the others, and that's the notion of support services for the students. We cannot expect students to come into high school totally ready to jump into a rigorous technical education program, or for that matter, a rigorous academic program. You know the data. A lot of them aren't prepared for high school work of any kind, let alone a high-quality, rigorous push on technical education. So those support services are critical. So I'm going to run through really fast here, faster than I thought I was going to do, average effects, faster than a speedy bullet. And I want to talk about what we know about average effects. Now, what I mean by that is, all of you remember fondly the bell-shaped curve in your research class, right? Normal distribution of a population, you sample for planet, blah, blah, blah. We've done a number of studies using national data sets from the National Center for Educational Statistics and others that we've gotten our hands on. So I'll be sharing some of that with you. But also that I want to drill down and look just briefly at some research. There's a lot more on what we might think of as high quality and what it's telling us. And in doing this, we want to look at what I would call systems. This includes things like career pathways, career academies, career magnets, regional centers, shared time or full-time centers. These are systems. These are comprehensive approaches to the design and delivery of career and technical education. But we also have data on specific kind of program effects, if you will. Auto technology, health occupations, pick one of them. But programs themselves are uniquely positioned to affect the lives of students. And then finally, the pedagogy itself. For me, this is a biggie. Because at the end of the day, it's not only what you deliver, but it's how you deliver it. And Career in Tech has three unique opportunities that other teachers in high school don't have. You obviously have the classroom, which every teacher has, but you also have the Career Tech student organizations, the FFAs, the Skills USAs, the DECAs. They are, when used well and properly, a terrific pedagogy. They're more than just winning trophies. They are a way to engage kids in learning. And then, of course, work-based learning. We've got all three, and every high-quality program, I would argue, based on the evidence, should have all three. So, what are we focusing on? Some of this has been alluded to earlier. But to me, and based on the work that we've been doing over the last 30 years or so, we have to start with the academic piece. But understand this, it's not about just passing an Algebra 2 class. Rather, it's being able to take those academics and turn them into tools to solve authentic, real problems. Knowing something in the abstract is terrific if you're a college professor, but beyond that, real people need to be able to use knowledge to address and solve real problems. So it's the occupational expression of academics. The occupational skills, generic occupational skills. This was alluded to earlier. I heard mention of Paul Tuff's book. Well, the original work comes out of a guy named Heckman at the University of Chicago and Angela Duckworth, the University of Pennsylvania. She coined the term grit, for example. She was just named last week as a MacArthur genius. Not bad for a young 30-something woman starting out her career. Terrific concept, but it is exactly what was being discussed by Randy. It's the idea that we have to help young people learn how to stick with something. That's one of the strongest predictors of success. Forget academics, forget everything else. It's the ability to fail, which we don't like kids to do in school. I was a teacher. I didn't want my kids to fail, so I'd help them out, nudge them along. No, let them fail. Let them go through what Gene Bottoms talks about as productive struggle. Suffer. That's the essence of salvation. Oh, I'm sorry. Had a moment there. Back under that tent. My point is simply this, is that there are these generalizable employable skills. I was interviewing a manufacturer in South Carolina a couple of months ago as part of an NSF thing, and so the usual question I ask these guys, wherever I am, what do you look for in a new hire? He just looked at me and said, I want somebody who can look me in the eye, shake my hand, and say hi. Where's that in the curriculum? Employability skills, the ability to interact, the interpersonal skills. All of those things are incredibly important, but we just tend to shuffle them off to the side because we've got to get them through the next math test or reading test. So we've got the sort of employability skills. We had scans, 21st century skills. We've got these non-cognitive skills like persistence and other behavioral traits. All of these have to be part of the curriculum. And then finally, employers hire you because you can do something. So the technical skills, whatever they happen to be, it is these three skill sets that we have to focus on. Now, let me just, where'd it go? Okay. I'm sorry I missed a picture, but I'll forget about it. Engagement, achievement, and transition. We do this because we're trying to increase student engagement and we're trying to increase student achievement, academic, technical, and employability, and we're trying to enhance transition. Okay? These are the three things that ought to be the focus of our thinking. We've got to build the academic skills, the employability skills, and the technical skills, but we do that. In doing that, we have to engage the kids, help them master the content, technical and otherwise, and help them make transitions. So we've been looking at data, and these are average effects. One of the questions that we've been wrestling with for more than 20 years, we've looked at data sets going back into the early 90s. Does career technical education have any holding power? Does it keep kids in school? Because absent a high school completion, you got nothing. GEDs don't count. I'm sorry if anybody's in those programs, but if you look at the labor market data, they just don't count. Finishing high school is a necessary first condition to any part of the rest of the conversation. So we've been looking at the data. Now, the most recent analysis is something called a survival analysis. Unless you're really interested, I won't bore you with the analytics behind it. Know this, the shorter the bar, the better. So we're looking at a national sample of kids across the United States. We're asking the question, of all the usual suspects, gender, ethnicity, race, parents' education, parents' income. There's a whole laundry list of these things. What are the strongest predictors of kids surviving high school? Okay? The shorter the bar, the better. Shortest bar, 9th grade grade point average. No surprise. Pretty standard stuff. By the way, the blue bar on the far left, gender, no effect. Neither good nor bad, just not significant. The red bar, if they come into high school overage, that's a strong predictor of not finishing. Again, not a surprise to any of us in education. But it's the three bars on the right that are kind of intriguing. 3 credits or more in career and tech is a strong predictor, stronger predictor of finishing high school than parents' socioeconomic status. 3 credits or more with a focus, shop 1, shop 2, shop 3, is stronger yet. It's the second strongest predictor of finishing high school, looking at a national probability of sample of kids. Now, that's interesting. And by the way, that's pretty consistent with looking at kids who graduated in 1992, 1999, 2002, 2004. We're getting pretty much the same picture over time. But remember Aaron and Liam? I also have 3 adult male children. I qualify that. 3 chronologically adult male children because, you know, in our culture, males are not adults until they hit, 40s, give or take. Ladies, shake your hand. Oh, yeah, got that right. David Brooks, about a year ago, he writes in the local newspaper, right? New York Times? Got all the grocery store coupons in it. Wrote an article. He talked about boys in education. And he pointed out something that a lot of us have been looking at for some time, and that is this. Boys do less well in school than girls. By 12th grade, they're reading below girls. 11th grade boys right at an 8th grade level. They used to have an advantage in math and science, but that gap is closing. We've put a lot of energy in getting more girls engaged in math and science, and that's terrific. But in the meantime, boys aren't faring so well. They're more likely to be the ones with discipline problems, and this is the one that gets me. 75% of all the D's and F's that we award in public education go to boys. We're driving them out of school. If you keep telling my Liam and Aaron that they're stupid, guess what? They get the picture. They go, oh, this isn't the place for me. In fact, when you go all up and down the education pipeline, less boys and girls finish high school, start college, finish college, start grad school, finish grad school. Anywhere in the education pipeline, boys are not faring very well. So what we did is we went back and looked at those same data. And we said, we saw no gender effect, remember? I'm thinking, got to be something going on here. So we pulled them apart, ran the models separate for boys and girls, and here's what we found. Everything stayed the same except the gender effect. Turns out, career and technical education participation has a strong effect for boys, no effect for girls. It does no harm, it does nothing positive. It means they can major, they can focus, and that's okay. Doesn't do any harm. But for boys, it's predictive of them finishing high school. Again, the necessary first condition. And again, this is our work. There's other work that supports this. A couple of economists back to Georgetown. For some reason I like Georgetown. Harry Holzer and some others wrote a paper recently, and this was one of their conclusions. They talk about improving graduation rates and labor market earnings, especially for at-risk youth, and they tie it to high-quality career and technical education. Something going on there. So let's look at the pedagogic tools we have. I mentioned them earlier. These are the kinds of things about which there is evidence available. And I'm going to zip through some of this. Again, work-based learning, classroom instruction, CTSOs. Now, looking back, looking forward, since A Nation at Risk, that was announced earlier or mentioned earlier, we have added to the average high school graduate the equivalent of a full year of academics, close to 7 academic credits, primarily in math and science, since that time period. So think of it as that high school, school is now 13 years in effect. I was in a school district the other day. The kids on average graduate with 31 credits, Carnegie units. So what's happened? Reading scores are basically flat. These are by NAEP scores, by the way. You can argue about NAEP. Yeah, the tests are different now than they were before, and this is just for that. Different populations of kids because the population is different. It's the only thing we've got that really lets us look longitudinally, however. And essentially, math, science, and reading scores haven't changed, despite the fact we're having kids do more and more of math, science, and reading. It's not getting us anywhere. It doesn't seem to be. Now, we've been doing some drilling down on math, and I'm going to just share some stuff. For those, is New York an ACT state? I don't know. Or is it College Board primarily? College Board? Okay, SAT, okay, ACT. We've been using ACT data because we can get them. College Board has been a little less willing to play with us. ACT. They say that a 22 on their math test is college ready. Minimal, but college ready. So, they also say that every high school student should have Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2. When you look at their reports of kids who take Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, 26% can hit the 22. That's got to be a tough test. If you add trig, it goes up to about 37%. By the way, they say this is for college and careers in that report that I drew this from. If you add calculus, you're talking the equivalent of 5 years of high school math now, you can get over half of the kids hitting the 22. Must be a pretty hard test. 22. By the way, it's not just kids who struggle with math. I'm here to tell you that statistics don't lie. So, the National Center on Education and the Economy looked at, I'm going to come back to that 22 in a minute. National Center on Education and the Economy said they looked at that 2-year college occupational programs. What math is used, what math is needed, okay? Because, again, community colleges is where you get the technical education primarily. It's mostly middle school math. It's not a prerequisite for anything they could find. Algebra 2 isn't. However, reading skills are higher. 11th and 12th grade. I got a reading teacher out going, yes, give me, okay, yes. Students entering community colleges are weak in both. No surprise there. We've been looking at the ACT stuff, and here's what we did. We took the concepts of the ACT 22, and we mapped it to course syllabi from 3 states, California, Texas, Massachusetts. We said, okay, where do you find this stuff that's so hard for these kids to pass after 3 and 4 and 5 years of high school math? Well, guess what? It's middle school math and Algebra 1. a little bit of geometry. I was on a panel last night for a local public radio station, a guy that, another manufacturer who was invited in because he's running this high school apprenticeship program, which is really cool. And he's sitting next to me, and he got a question from the audience. He started out by saying, I'm not a fan of public education. You hear that a lot, right? He said, but I got to tell you, I got kids coming in as 11th and 12th graders for this apprenticeship program who cannot deal with fractions, decimals, percentages, measurement, and estimation. He said, it's not just the kids. He said the adults who come in and apply for these jobs. This is in an advanced manufacturing operation where you have to know something about fractions, decimals, percentages, and measurement to be sure. He has the same problem with adults. This is elementary and middle school math, folks. No matter how much math they take, they can't hit that 22, which is what that test measures. Now, we look at average effects for career and tech on all kinds of academic tests. It's kind of positive, not much going on there. It's not significant. In statistical world, that means it's kind of something, but it's not really much to talk about. So we've been looking at our research on how do you improve the teaching of math, science, and literacy in career and technical education classes by career and technical education teachers. And that's a unique aspect of our approach. So we look at mathematics. We found some really interesting things. Now, these are rigorous scientific experiments, random assignment, rare to see in public education. We were able to pull it off. Basically, we got pretty strong effects, positive effects. We were able to substantially move the needle with about 11% of the class time devoted by career tech teachers to teaching math in the context of the auto shop, of the ag program, of the business class, of the health occupations class, whichever one we were in. No negative effects on technical skill development. It's a winner. We've also been mapping that to the Common Core because the Common Core is sort of the current set of standards we need to pay attention to. And I think there's a phrase in one of their documents that really explains why this is both important and powerful. Academic content and those performance skills are inextricably linked. That is to say, knowledge of algebra, knowledge of fractions, and all of that has to be linked to some use of that through performance. And career and tech is one of the best places. I would argue you can do it in an art class, you can do it in a science class, you can do it in a sociology class in high school. Now, as all of you know, funds are tough for everything, and so for our research, we've been really struggling to find more support for the kind of work we want to do. Moving right along, we also ran experimental studies in reading. We tested 2 different kinds of approaches, and we found, that must have hurt, we found again significant positive effects. Career tech teachers implementing reading strategies in their career and tech classrooms. By the way, the kind of complexity of technical manuals outstrips anything college students see ever. Those students have to know how to read it. You don't want a semi-literate person working on your brakes on your new car because otherwise you may become one with the side rail on the side of the road. Our science experiment, same kind of model. We didn't find any overall effect, but we found an interesting but curious effect. We disaggregated the data. The minority students in the classes, actually there was a strong, significant effect. Now, I don't know what to do with that. We're still trying to sort of think that through. But regardless, we're continuing to study this one because I'm particularly concerned that in our culture, we have an innate inability to connect observable human behavior with manifest outcomes. I mean, take the stairs for God's sake. I mean, it's pretty simple. Okay. So, work-based learning. Again, there are a lot of things that we can do in career and tech, from kind of on the light end of job shadowing all the way up to heavy-duty, honest-to-goodness apprenticeships, where students spend substantial parts of the day in a real work environment working with a meister or master. We can help them understand the relevance. That's a wonderful place to build those non-cognitive skills because they actually have to solve problems. Career development, leading to industry certifications, there are a lot of things that speak to the value of work-based learning. In fact, everywhere except here, work-based learning, VET, by the way, Vocational Education and Training, or TVET, is the term that everybody else in the world uses to describe what we call career and technical education. Everywhere else in the world, there are substantial percentages of young people engaged in this. Finland was mentioned earlier. 55% of young Finns who leave lower secondary, which is roughly the equivalent of our 10th grade, choose to go into VET. In fact, the college prep regimen is the default for those who can't get into VET because they don't have enough space for them. Finland. And they outscore us and everything. But I have a theory. If you can speak Finn, you're pretty smart. That's a hard language. I lived near some Finns in northern Minnesota, and it's like, what do you say? Okay. We don't make the chart, by the way, in this OECD report. By the way, these same states, those adolescents, have higher school attendance rates, higher upper secondary, think of it as our high school completion rates, higher rates of college attendance. They go from apprenticeships to college. What a concept. It's not an issue for them. They wonder why we make such a big deal out of it. So we talk about transition, again, some meta-analyses. If we look at studies of college enrollment, pretty strong effects of participating. These are average effects from across studies going over the last 6 years. Strong effects, mostly two-year colleges, I might add, which makes sense because that's where the technical education occurs. We look at employment, very strong effects. Again, lots of data supporting that. So, someone mentioned earlier this is career and tech's time. I think it is. But it's career and tech's time in the context of talking about high quality. And again, I point to some examples. SREB, the National Academies Foundation, Linked Learning. There are a lot of good models out there. Part of the challenge is the lack of the kind of data that is compelling. And again, I go back to, I'm a researcher. Show me the evidence. And there's part of the challenge in that is it's just difficult to get the kind of data that makes the compelling, really hard arguments. Programs of study, it's part of this conversation, but the larger framework for all of this is college and career ready. And it's college and career ready. This is not mutually exclusive stuff. If we prepared kids through the kinds of schools that we're going to visit tomorrow, I'm familiar with most of them, and other schools I've been in around the country, if we prepare them for that, they're also ready for college. Because the skills needed, the academic skills needed, the non-cognitive skills needed to be successfully prepared for a career are the same ones that will make you successful in college. So, this, by the way, I'll share these pictures with Randall or anybody else who wants them. Actually, I'll give you my email at the end if you want them. I'll send them directly to you. Rigorous programs of study. Again, lots of examples of things out there. Linking secondary and post-secondary has to be a piece of this. If you have a high school program in something, and there's a community college or tech college or two-year college down the road that has the same program, if you have two different advisory committees, you're not doing your job. In fact, you're creating problems because you're having two separate conversations when it should be one. And if you don't know that instructor or those instructors in the same program, you are also not doing your job. Those relationships have to be, I don't want to use the term intimate because that suggests many things, but a couple of beers now and then wouldn't hurt the cause. Same thing with your business partners, same thing with your labor unions, and so on. The pedagogy, we have to have a systematic or systems approach. And then finally, we've mentioned professional development. So if you take away anything this evening, aside from hunger and fatigue, secondary career tech helps kids finish high school. Necessary first condition. High quality career tech can increase academic achievement and support what's going on with the Common Core state standards. And it improves transition to post-secondary. I didn't talk much about this, but we've got a whole body of research on the need for intensive and extensive career development. It's more than guidance. It's more than having one counselor to 800 teachers or whatever the ratio is in California and some other states. It's distributed guidance. It's every teacher playing a role in the assignments they give, English, science, math, social studies, foreign language, and in the career and tech classes that help students continue to develop, but it really needs to start early. No later than middle school, even earlier in elementary school, and there's some interesting models of that. requires you guys, the teachers in the room, and those of you who work with teachers, you have a really complex job. You have to be an expert pedagogue. You have to be an expert technical person. You've got to know the skill, know the trade, know the technology, and you have to know how to teach. That is a tough thing, very tough thing, which is why I'm a professor and not a high school teacher. God, you guys work too hard. High quality career tech is nested in this broader systems approach I've talked about briefly, this vertical alignment, horizontal alignment with the academics and so forth, and internal integration with contextualized learning, project-based learning. There are many strategies that work. There is no one single strategy, but there's a constellation of strategies that work better at times for some kids and different ones at times for other kids. Now, as I've said, you guys have a tough problem. A job. It's a challenge. I would argue it kind of borders on a moral obligation to make sure we do this and we do it well, because these are the Aarons and the Liams of the world. But it's difficult to try to do all of this, trying to be all things to all people. And that's kind of what we're asking you to do, but there are challenges in this. You get the dog back. Come on. My first degree's in marketing. You may not believe it, but so I want to leave you with an honest philosophical consideration. Paul Barton, who's a labor market economist at Education Testing Service. Why do they have labor market economists? I don't know. But he's written a lot about this subject, and he makes this observation, and I think it's important. And I think, again, it goes back to the data. High school is the last education opportunity that's presumably wholly paid for by the public. Its purpose has to be to do the best it can do to provide everyone, every child who leaves, what's necessary to enter and further prepare for adult life. And again, if you look at the data from Pathways report, for a lot of kids, high school is the last formal experience they'll have with education, if they finish high school, which we have to continue to focus on. We have to think about how we make high school matter for all kids, not just the elect few who will go on to post-secondary. So, that's my sermon for the evening. Thank you. And by the way, that's my email's at the bottom. If you want your own personalized set of these pictures, send me a note. Be happy to share them.
Okay, a question or two. Over there.
Great presentation. Thank you. I'm Monica from the Alliance for Excellent Education, a nonprofit advocacy group in D.C. My question is about you on your second to the last slide, I think it was, you said that CTE enhances academic achievement. I know that there's been a number of reports or studies that say that students are more likely to graduate high school than their peers in traditional public schools. They're more engaged in the classroom, but I haven't seen very much research to that point about CTE actually enhancing academic achievement and students, I guess, being more or better prepared academically than their peers. And if maybe there are some studies that you can share, or if you can elaborate on that. Thank you.
Yes. I'm happy to. I raced through some of those data. We've looked at how you teach math, science, and reading contextualized in career tech courses. And in those studies, we've shown very strong shifts in terms of students' math and reading ability. Again, the science has some mixed findings. So when I separate out kind of average effects, and I think when you see reports, and I did show you the one slide that showed on average we don't see much going on, which is supportive of what you just said. But when you look at what I would call high quality, which is an integrated contextualized approach, you do see academic achievement going up, and by pretty sizable amounts. Okay? And send me a note. I'll send that to you.
Anyone else? Okay. We do have somebody right over there. Excuse me.
Hello, everyone. Dan Danny Solomon, Tottenville High School, Staten Island. First, great presentation. Thank you very much. One of the things that you spoke about at the very end, and I am not a numbers cruncher, and you did a great job, and God bless you for doing that. That's a wonderful skill to be able to possess. But on an anecdotal level, part of why CTE works is because the teachers buy into it probably more so than any place else. And that's something that the data really is unable to show, that we are above and beyond what it takes in order to make these kids succeed. We don't let up, we persevere, we are ruthless and probably are very gritty in what we do to make sure these kids achieve. We treat them like our family members, okay? And I don't know how you can extrapolate that information from all the data that you have, but if you can, you would see that if we can get everybody else to buy into it the way CTE teachers do, we may have a much better system.
Good point, and one with which I do not disagree. I know a lot of career tech educators and work a lot with them, both as looking at them as white mice in a maze, but also on a collegial level. And you're absolutely correct. And some of that comes from the intensity of the kind of teaching-learning relationship, but also through the use of the student organizations and the other sorts of things. Now, having said that, I would also maintain, I know other teachers in the more traditional academic areas that have that same sort of passion. Now, how do you A, measure it, and B, scale it up? I like to tell everybody, you know, there was only one Jaime Escalante, right? Stand and Deliver. If you missed the movie, it was terrific. The book's even better. There's a reason there was only one of him, because he had a unique set of skills and passion for what he did. There are lots of great math teachers around the country. There are lots of great science teachers, lots of great English language arts teachers. But it's a challenge for all teachers to do what the really good career tech teachers do. And so I don't want to diminish what they do, but I also fully recognize that there is a kind of special relationship. Oftentimes it's because you'll see the same students several years. And there are often fewer of them than, say, a 50-person math class or something. So there are possible reasons for understanding why those differences may exist, but it doesn't diminish either what you do and your colleagues do, or it doesn't diminish the terrific challenge that all public education teachers have. And I mean, someone mentioned Finland, we mentioned other countries. I mean, the kinds of support they have to do the kinds of things that you were just describing, we don't have in most schools in this country, and that's wrong.
If I may, we must be doing something right, of course. When we are at Tottenville High School, Staten Island, we just had some dignitaries from Israel come over to see what we do at the school, because okay, I don't need this, but to see what we do at the school, because we're part of New York City, and New York City CTE, whether you know it or not, is renowned in many, many places. You would not necessarily know it within the New York City DOE at sometimes, but that being said, we are renowned, and other places do look at what we are doing that is successful, and we had these dignitaries from the Ministry of Education come over and take a look at our school, and they were very impressed and pleased at what they saw at our school. So we are doing something right within the CTE realm in order to have these people come over and take a look at us. Thank you.
And thank you, Jim, for a very interesting and entertaining talk. So let me